Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1011B, and today's date is July 1st, 2016, and the title of the episode is Obama Offers Peace or Ultimatum to Putin. Now, before I get started, let me just make an announcement of why there was no report on Thursday, June 30th. I was moving my entire family to a new rental place. I do rent, I do not own. The landlord told me about 2 weeks ago that they wanted to sell. I said good luck, because there's 3 or 4 of the units I was in for sale on the block, and they've been on the market for a very long time, and they were getting very nervous that something was going on in real estate. They wanted to sell, and they gave me 2 weeks to get out. They're saying they're breaking the lease, and I said fine, no problem. And I started to look around. Actually, I found a nicer place for less money, because I noticed that rents are now coming down. They're not as high as everyone thinks they are, and you can bargain very nicely with many people. And I was waiting for my internet to be turned on, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and it never happened, so I was not able to do the report that day. And now that I am back up and running, it should be smooth sailing from now on, except for the collapse, war, and everything else that's going on. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, we realize that Egypt Air, that crashed in the Mediterranean, and they were looking for the black boxes. They found the black boxes. They said the black boxes were damaged. During that time, we know that the U.S. and Israel and other nations were having some type of military drill at the same exact time in the same area. Now, they found the recorders. They were trying to repair them, and they have repaired them. And the black box suggests that the plane caught on fire before disappearing from radars and plunging into the Mediterranean. Now, the experts, they're hoping the black box data will shed the light on the sequence of events preceding the crash, because they want to know, where did this fire come from? And we can see right now that when they took off from Charles de Gaulle Airport, everything was fine. The box was recording. And then all of a sudden, at an altitude of about 37,000 feet, everything just went blank. So they're looking for the cockpit voice recorder. They're hoping they'll be able to listen to it and hopefully get a transcript from it to understand what happened. And we can see right now they're not very sure. They're trying to put all the pieces together. And we'll have to wait to see why this airplane came out of the sky so suddenly. Now, out in Italy, something very interesting is happening. And we're not just seeing it in Italy, we're seeing it in France and many other countries. They're starting to look at the situation and saying, you know something, these sanctions against Russia, they are not benefiting our country. It's actually doing more harm than good. We know the United States wants these sanctions, but it's not working out for us. So the parliament in northwestern Italy has voted in favor of a resolution to recognize Crimea as part of Russia and lift the sanctions from Russia, which is something they might want to do right now, because as we can see, the entire situation was created by the United States government central bankers. Now, Obama, he was in Canada, as we know, giving speeches, talking about global economy, talking about an international order. And we see already he's pushing the idea of Russian aggression as he's giving this speech. And he's saying that Canada and NATO, they need to send a solidarity message to the rest of the world. He's saying that Russia and their aggressive state, they need to back down from Ukraine. And all the countries, the allies, they need to send a strong message of solidarity and commitment at the next week's NATO summit. He went on to say, when nations violate international rules and norms, such as Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the United States and Canada stand united, along with our allies, in defense of our collective security. It's starting to sound like war talk to me. And this is how it gets started. And we can see that the United States continually uses the idea that Russia is being very aggressive. They're invading Ukraine. They're in Syria. The United States flies planes or ships very close to theirs and blames it on Russia. They do the same thing with China. They're saying that U.S. diplomats, they're being harassed by the Russian security service. And Washington Post even put out an article saying that a U.S. diplomat was beaten by a Russian security guard. And this is the way they said it went down. The Russian Federal Security Service guard stationed outside the U.S. Embassy in Moscow attacked and beat up a U.S. diplomat who was trying to enter the compound. Now, what really happened was a U.S. spy, CIA agent, attacked a Russian police officer. But they turned it around and they put out this story in the Washington Post. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to push the idea that Russia is very aggressive. They're not just flying their planes close to the U.S. planes. They're not just sailing their ships or taking their subs and sending them over to the U.K., which all of this is completely fake, phony, and false, because it's all been proved that no, that all of this didn't happen. The U.S. flew their planes very close and near Russia. The U.K. made up the story about Russian subs. Russia told them where they were going to be. Actually, they were sailing the sub above the water. They made it into a big deal. They're using propaganda. And the reason for all of this is because they need to get a war started. They're trying as hard as they possibly can. Because what's happening is everything is starting to fall apart on them. Remember that Libyan Unity government that the UN, the US, and the coalition forces put together, and they forced it on the people because the people didn't elect for this government. It was forced upon them and said, you will accept. Even though you elected a government, no, this is the one we want you to have. It doesn't sound very democratic. But something very interesting just happened. The Libyan Unity government is falling apart. The finance minister, the justice minister, the national reconciliation minister, economy and industry minister, they all submitted their resignation to the presidential council. They said they're done. So what we're seeing right now in the Middle East, things are rapidly falling apart. The plan they had in Libya, not doing well. The plan they had in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, not doing well at all. And as this accelerates, so is the acceleration for war. And what we're seeing right now is they're pushing this. Actually, in Iraq, if you look at Iraq right now, when the U.S. gets out of the way of the Iraqi soldiers, guess what? They have success. They're able to push the Islamic State out of their country. They're able to defeat them in Fallujah, in different areas of Iraq. But the U.S., for some reason, is still in Iraq. And when you look at this, we see that the Islamic State, they only control 10% of the territory in Iraq. They used to control 40%, the proxy army of the United States government central bankers. So what in the world are the troops doing in Iraq? And why are more going there? Because it seems that the Iraqi forces, they have this under control. But the U.S., they're loaning Iraq $2.7 billion for war equipment. The people are rising up. They don't want the puppet government in place. They don't want the central bankers controlling everything. And we see right now that the U.S.-led coalition, They're not even listening to the requests of the Iraqi forces. The Iraqi forces said this is a convoy we should hit. The United States didn't take them out. Instead, Iraq had to do it. They're acting now independently of the U.S. forces. They're not relying on them whatsoever. And they're starting to realize we don't need the U.S. forces there anymore. We can handle this. And they have been handling it. But we know something else is going on. They want to take the Middle East. They want to divide it up. And to do this, they need forces in the area. They need certain things to happen. And this is what we're watching for. Now, Russia is continually delivering humanitarian aid into Syria. They've delivered about 6 metric tons of humanitarian aid to the Syrian province of Latakia. And we see right now the U.S. continually uses excuses that they can't bring any aid in. And every time they bring aid in, guess what? It's weapons. They supply them to the Islamic State, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, moderate rebels. And we see that Russia is truly bringing in aid to help the people. Assad's forces, the Assad government, is allowing the UN aid to come into the country. And we need to remember something very important here. That the U.S., at this point, they don't care about the people inside of Syria, because this is quite evident. The moderate rebels, the terrorists, have been doing horrific things to the people. They've been using sarin gas, chlorine, mustard gas. And they've been using it on the people of Syria. I know they've been blaming it on Assad, but we have evidence that it was the terrorists, it was the moderate rebels, and the evidence continually presents itself. And this shows us that the U.S., they never really do care about the people. Because once they get their way, anyone that opposes them, they are the terrorists. Now, we see that Turkey has identified the airport bombers. They were Russian. And we see right now that this is being used for a specific purpose. Because we see U.S. NATO, they are sending Patriot anti-ballistic missile interceptor batteries to Turkey. Of course, it has no military justification and may be in preparation for a manufactured incident to provoke a new crisis. And we see that they've already given the HIMARS missile system. We know they've been building a wall. We know the security has been improved by Department of Homeland Security. And we're starting to see that this airport attack is giving Turkey incentive to battle the Islamic State. Now, has the United States decided, okay, we can't save the Islamic State inside of Syria, so they're changing course. We should all go after the Islamic State. Because if we notice at this point that the U.S. is protecting al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, and the moderate rebels, which is all one and the same. They airlifted a lot of the Islamic State out of Syria and brought them to Libya. But we see right now that things are starting to heat up. We're moving towards that August 1st date, where we know in August there's supposed to be some type of transitional government. We know Assad is not going to step down. We know that Russia and Syria has said we should let the people decide if Assad should stay or go. Now, are we going to have elections on August 1st? Most likely not. But the U.S., they're pushing for Assad's removal. That's their goal. Period. So Obama, he came out with something very interesting. He's proposing a pact with Russia to strengthen military cooperation in Syria. Well, let me see. Russia was invited by the elected president in a sovereign country, and the U.S. and the coalition forces are invading that country. Okay, but let's go with it. He's saying to Russia that they should create this partnership and strengthen cooperation between the two nations in the fight against terrorist groups in Syria. Now, he sent the proposal to the Russian government. And the United States is promising to work with Russian Air Force in coordinating, targeting, and bombing al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, and any other terrorist organization, in exchange for Russia convincing Assad to halt his bombing campaign against U.S.-supported rebels. There's one problem here. They keep saying they can't separate al-Nusra and the moderate rebels. They're too intertwined. And they're saying if they do make this and they go ahead and they bomb moderate rebels, well, they're going to have to take this to the next level. Now, of course, what they're trying to do here, because we know they're intertwined, they're trying to save al-Nusra and al-Qaeda, because they'll say the moderate rebels are right there. You can't bomb this area. So is this really a true proposal in joining with Russia? No. This is another scheme to get Assad and Russia to stop bombing their proxy armies. Plain and simple. That's all they're doing right here. They're buying time once again. And we're starting to see that they're trying to push this idea as we get closer and closer to August 1st. Now, does that mean something's going to happen on that date? It might. It might not. Maybe it'll happen in the middle of August. We don't know. But this is what we need to watch, because we're looking at all these geopolitical indicators, and they are definitely pointing to something happening in this time frame. Something might change. Maybe Putin will come up with some other type of plan and say, okay, we'll take part of your proposal, Obama, and we'll also do this. But we'll have to wait and see, because we can see right now Putin is on the other end, and he is trying to stop a war. He's trying to calm the situation down, trying to get rid of the terrorists inside of Syria. And we know the coalition forces, the U.S. forces, they're not there to get rid of the terrorists. They're there to support the terrorists. But we can see that many things are already in place. They've been training the moderate rebels to call in airstrikes. We know the French, the U.S., they've been building air bases. We know their special op teams are on the ground. We know that Turkey has gotten Patriot missile batteries once again. They have the HIMAR missile system. We know that they've been building a wall. They set up security, travel advisories all over the place. We know there was another false flag to say, hey, let's go after the Islamic State. We know there are warships already in the Mediterranean standing by. And we know the Islamic State, they've been losing ground. They're beaten. They only have 10% of Iraq right now. Syria, they're being pushed further and further out of the country. And the U.S. is backed into a corner. They need to save their moderate rebels. They need to save al-Nusra. They need to save al-Qaeda. That's what they have left right now. And they're doing whatever they possibly can. And as we know, this economy is deteriorating very, very quickly. And as we go through this summer, we're going to see things accelerate. We're already seeing it. And there's more on the way, because they need to convince the world it is time to go to war. And this is why we can expect an event. Another one, most likely another one after that, until we get to the main one, where they bring everyone into war. And we need to continually watch this. And this is why I continually say everyone needs to be prepared and ready. You need to have a weapon. You need to have food. You need to have cash on hand. You need to have gold and silver. And eventually, I hope there's going to be a time and place where all of us can band together and say, you know what? Let's go march on Washington and say, we are not going to war. We need tens of millions of people out there at the front door of the White House to say, no, it's time for you to step down. So continue to prepare, get ready, because when the collapse comes, They will not be able to stop it. War is just going to mask of what really happening here. Food supplies are going to dry up. Deliveries most likely are going to stop or slow dramatically. And it's going to be very difficult to feed your family, to give them water, to get medical supplies, to protect your family from those who need supplies or will do harm to get those supplies. And we can see, looking at other countries, that yes, this does happen. And it will happen here. It doesn't seem like it because you look out your window, you walk down the street and you say, no, this could never happen here. Well, never say never. We've never been in a situation like this. We've never been in a situation where there's so much debt. The U.S. is provoking war all over the place. They're telling us, if we believe their story, there's terrorism. I mean, if we go back in time and said, listen, would you ever think that they'd be able to bring down the World Trade Center right in the middle of Manhattan? People would say, no, that's impossible. How are they going to do it? The buildings are gigantic. But it happened. One day. All of a sudden, they brought them down. And of course, they blamed their proxy army so we can go off to war. So we can invade Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Lebanon. They used it for all of it because they knew they needed to capture these countries, to place all of these countries, their natural resources, on the petrodollar. They're getting ready once again to do something horrific. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.